All right.
Okay.
Excellent, excellent. So last time we spent about 3 hours together. And so what practice have you been doing since then?
So I've decided having our conversation really sort of bolstered my motivation, and I figured so I've just decided to go and pretty much take what you said word for word. So I've been focusing on anapanasati, sort of just throughout the day. I've been trying to do daily, like noting throughout the day, trying to be aware of my thoughts in particular when they arise and when they stop. When I start thinking in particular during a task. Yeah, and I've just been doing. Oh, hold on. Far out. Sorry. Skype. Okay. Yeah. So I've also got a printer. So I printed out the suttas you told me. I read the Satipatthana. I had previously read the Anapanasati, but I read it again, and I had a glance at the relay chariot sutta. But I wanted to talk a bit about, because I went on the site you recommended me, the Buddha or meditation to or whatever, and I downloaded a few of Buddha Dasa's books,
Okay.
and I glanced at his Anapanasati book, and I was like, oh, it's 500 pages. So I was hoping to talk about some of the link between Anapanasati and the Satipatthana Sutta, as well as some of the weird arguments I've seen people get into about the legitimacy of the Satipatthana Sutta. Because I see
The
a few people.
legitimacy of the Satipatthana Sutta, if there are any, they should be about the first part of the sutta, not the important part.
Okay, what's the first
The,
part regarding?
that's where they get the list of 40 meditations, the charnel ground and the casinas and all of that. But basically, those are meditations and things that were done before the time of the Buddha. In
Right.
fact, the Buddha makes that point in the Anapanasati Sutta, but for some reason, everybody misses that point.
Okay.
Okay, what point is that especially the kasina meditations that are based in the Satipatthana is an older Satipatthana. The older
Right.
Satipatthana is earth, water, fire, and air, the old original elements out of, basic human knowledge before we knew about
Right.
water being a compound. Okay. So, most of those meditations then that came naturally, or let us say were invented over the millennia, came from those things. For instance, stargazing has been
Right.
something that's been done by almost every society.
It's just a
Fire
natural
gazing,
behavior.
pardon?
It's just a natural behavior to look up at the stars. They're beautiful.
Yes, exactly. The same thing is getting mesmerized by a fire.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Or even generally it's flowing water, but it doesn't have to be flowing water. It can be mesmerizing just by looking at small variations, etc. And you can also see why crystal meditations are actually included with water meditations.
Yeah.
And then the full-on kasina meditations are often mud packs or leaves stitched together. So if you
Mm-hmm.
see someone translating it as a blue, they're missing the point that in Pali they don't make a big difference or distinction between blue and green. But here we can, because leaves aren't blue, they're green, because they go
Right.
from green and yellow. And sometimes brown is mentioned. So these are where these meditations are coming from. The most important, in the sense of yuckiness, is the
Hmm.
charnel ground meditations. Now, if you think of charnel ground meditations as a meditation, then you can describe the various body conditions that a body goes through and understand that. But it's only when you become a bean counter rather than a Dhamma dude that you start counting every little stage of it as yet another meditation, because you're looking
Right.
for numbers and figures, and I've got more Dhamma than you do because I've got more numbers on my list than you do, kind
Right.
of mentality.
That's the what I've seen it in the suttas before. They talk about people who just follow scholastically the Dharma, and they get very hung up in the word, in the meaning of the words rather than the meaning of the words.
Right.
Um,
And they often
yeah.
they become translators, often the very best known translators.
Right.
All
Um.
right.
So just 1 second. I got to grab. Let me just grab the two suttas to follow along with.
Okay.
So So while I was looking around,
Can I
the
finish that? Can I finish this point before you go to the next
yes,
one?
yes,
Okay.
please go ahead.
The same thing is mentioned in the Anapanasati Sutta, in the respect that basically what the Anapanasati Sutta is, when you look at it from the beginning, first off, that it was announced in advance. The
Yeah, I
word
noticed that.
spread out. They all came. This was a major important gathering. The Buddha had something on his mind. Okay, and if you look at things like the four bases of power and other things like that, and also words like great fruit, great benefit for
Hmm.
practicing anapanasati. All right, but the point that I'm making at this juncture, back in one way of referencing back to the Satipatthana Sutta, is that in part of the early part of the Anapanasati Sutta, there is a bit of pacing. What I mean by pacing is in the sense of pacing and leading,
Hmm.
of meeting people where they are and then move them. Now, in its more insidious terminology, that's called a bait and switch. You
Right.
promise them what they want. In other words, you get them interested in what there is, and then you'll move them over.
Hmm.
All right. And in that regard, what was happening is what happens every time, but it happened in a kind of special way in the time of the Buddha. And that is this, that when people come to the teaching of the Buddha, or in fact almost any new thing, they come to it with a whole lot of misconceptions and ideas about what it
Hmm.
is. And somehow or another, instead of checking that outside the door, they brought it in and hung it on the wall. And now the temple of Buddhism is literally lined, heavy coats, one after another deep, of bad ideas that people brought into the temple with them.
Right.
Okay? And so, how that happens now is when Westerners bring Western ideas into, and therefore make it very difficult to understand the Dhamma. In the time
Right.
of the Buddha, they were bringing in also their own religious ideas and plans and things like that. And there were two groups that he did address. One was the group of the Brahma Viharas, and the other one was the group of the Kasina meditations that were producing jhana. He had been doing both. He knew all about these things. He was kind of a literary expert of all things religious because he went to all of the very best schools, okay? So he's already a PhD Harvard graduate in religion before he ever said, ain't none of this working. All right. And that's
nearly
when he
spat
sat
my
down.
coffee out in the screen.
Yeah. I'll time my jokes better to not choke you to death. So, what this is meaning is that many then of the students who are there at this gathering need to be stroked, blessed, patted on the head, and all of that kind of stuff, and then say, and now for something new.
Right. So this is like the magnum opus of the Buddha.
That's exactly right. That's why this sutta, above almost all others, is the El Primo Sutta of the Buddha, is this Anapanasati Sutta, because it's got its tentacles into everything.
Right.
All right. And not only that, but you could also say that everything about Buddhism then points to the Four Noble Truths, and the Four Noble Truths are deeply wrapped into the seven factors of enlightenment, and that the way to produce that is through the Satipatthana and through Anapanasati, not through jhana, and not through metta meditation. That metta meditation has its values, and in fact, the aspects of metta meditation, in fact, cannot be done. They can only be listed.
Right.
That it takes anapanasati in order to actually practice metta meditation correctly.
Oh, okay then.
At every step along the way. And here's a way that I'll map that for you. One of them is that metta itself is a method of bringing joy to the world. Let all beings be happy. But most students, especially Westerners, start like this: may all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. You know, not
gonna work.
not a chance. Okay, what we need is the joy that is part and parcel of Anapanasati, most specifically listed as step 10, and therefore visited very often, over and over and over again, is that metta. Anapanasati and metta are the same thing, except that Anapanasati shows exactly how to do it, and metta, generally people fail at it because it's idealistic. Second one, real compassion. Real compassion is noble right view, to get out of our own way, see things as they truly are, and begin to see things as they really are in the sense of suffering and no suffering. By seeing things as suffering, we begin to get enormous empathy. In other words, noble right view and compassion are the same thing, but when it's practiced as noble right view, it works. And when it's practiced as compassion built upon the foundation of metta, you're almost always going to wind up in pity, or I'm better than you are, or some sort of ignorant, in fact, instinctual solution rather than real knowledge. All right, so let's go to sympathetic joy if you want to climb up that step. So we've gotten metta, karuna, mudita. Mudita cannot be practiced directly. However, if you do have joy, then your joy becomes sympathetic joy. The way that the Buddhist religion teaches it is that never mind, you didn't get the job that somebody else did. You go be happy with him. He's got joy. You go learn how to be joy. That don't work. I've never seen that ever work. But what does work is when your own joy is overflowing. Now the sympathetic joy, the vibration is going back in the other direction. Now, when they sympathetically give you anger, you can counter that with sympathetic joy. And joy, when it's well used and done wisely, will conquer anger. It's a better frequency.
it's more enjoyable.
Yes, exactly. That's part of the reason why. All right. So then you go to Upeka. Well, if you don't have Nibbana, you're not going to have Upeka, and so the whole system of the Brahmaviharas falls apart. Now let's go to the other side of the story, and that's jhana. The Buddha did jhana. He did all the kasina meditations, and he came to find that those high states of deep concentration misses something. And what it's
Right.
missing is that if you're looking at the effect, you don't see the cause.
Okay, then.
And when you're studying one domino as it falls over, you're missing the whole show.
Right. Okay, see, this is something I've noticed quite a bit, and it seems broadly you can see there's like there's two sort of trends in the Theravadan Dharma as it's popular in the West, and it's like that sort of Burmese Mahasi thing that's very influenced by the Visuddhimagga and all that, and the Abhidhamma, and it's very sort of, it feels a bit sterile at times, like they don't very much have this sort of relaxed way of going about it. Everything's sort of very finely chopped up and it's all very modeled. Whereas when I go to the Thai forest tradition and the EBT, the early Buddhist text Buddhists, they have a bit more of a free thing with that, and they say you can manipulate the breath, you can manipulate things rather than just being present with it. I was wondering, why is that sort of the
All right.
thing?
Here's the answer to that. The natural way versus the formal way. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has already written large tracts on this about the natural way versus the formal way. Basically, the formal way means that you're going to teach a whole lot of people all the same thing, all at the same time, and they're going to progress in whatever it is you're teaching them all together, step by step, and all the parents especially going to be unhappy if their kid don't keep up.
Right, okay then.
You might have a musical genius who does not do his poetry very well, and everybody's unhappy.
Okay.
All right, that's the formal way. All of our school systems are set up that way, and the Burmese way is set up that way too. In fact, the Burmese way is, when I say the Burmese way, is not the right way of saying it. When we say it that way, we're saying that there was a method that was approved by Mahasi Sayadaw and Ledi Sayadaw for U Ba Khin to start teaching government officials in a step-by-step method, and one of his students was Goenka. And so you cannot get to Mahasi without going through Goenka and U Ba Khin, otherwise he would have never been known.
Right, okay.
Okay, now I got into it a little bit late, and Mahasi had already croaked, but by then U Pandita had already taken over, and by doing so with U Ba Khin, they made it as more and more formalized, and more detailed, and more structure. But that's not and has not ever been the Thai way. What's called the Thai, what excuse me, I almost said what's the real Thai forest tradition. Now there is something else that's known as the Thai forest tradition that we've already had, but that's a subset of the actual real Thai forest tradition, which is bigger than just the northeast area around Duban Rapasina.
Right, okay.
Okay, so Bhikkhu Buddhadasa is a big champion of the natural method. The natural method, we're experimenting. The normal way is that it's done one-on-one at the temple. Either a layman or a young monk sits and listens to the old man just go splatter on about the Dhamma. Okay, and that I was really lucky to have that happen with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. I was really lucky.
Yeah.
Okay, but I had other teachers, and each one
Right.
of them had their own technique. Now, I have completely lost track of Achan Lee, who was a Malaysian, but he spoke the best English. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa speaks English, or spoke English, but not perfectly, and it was a challenge for him.
Right.
Achan Po speaks mediocre English, And
Mhm.
he's the one who's been running the show since the 1960s. He's been the abbot.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so Achan Po's the man, and I was really, really also blessed with having Achan Po also be uh, in an ordination. There's two primary monks. One is the Upajjhaya, the overseer, and he's also called a preceptor. He's the boss.
Mhm.
And then under him is the Achan, who is going to be looking after the young monk day by day, and he's called an Achan in that ceremony, the Upajjhaya and the Achan. And Achan
Okay.
Po, when I call him Achan, I mean it more than most people do. They mean it because
Right.
they've heard it and it's an honorific. Oh no, he is my Achan because of the
Okay.
ordination, okay? And Kesat Thero was the Upajjhaya. But the point is, this natural method of one-on-one and teaching the Dhamma is the best way to do it. And
Mhm.
that, in fact, in every graduate school, as far as I know of, in every university in the world, that's how graduate school operates.
That's how my research works as well. One-on-one tutelage with it's like an apprentice master sort of thing. Bit like Star Wars.
You can actually take the word sort of out.
I mean, yeah, actually, that's true. It just straight up is, isn't it?
That's straight up it, and that's how humans have always done their apprentice work.
Right.
One old dude knows what he's doing, and everybody else is there watching and helping him. In fact, the best way to become an expert swordsmith making the original samurai swords is by being a guy with a hammer. And there you are doing what you're told to do, and he's going to use a small hammer, and he's going to talk to two different students, and their job is to use their big hammers to bang that sword into place. And that's how they learn to make a sword, is by watching the old master do it.
Mhm.
I can't think of any better way of teaching Dhamma, and I can't think of a better example than the sword.
Yeah, that's quite astute. And
Because we start out as a lump of human instinct, and we wind up. Um, there's an analogy that I should teach you. The analogy is the word kusala. You
mhm.
might have heard it. Do you know what the word means?
Body or bodily
Kusala,
form.
yeah, it's almost always used as kusala or akusala, and it's actually uh, is translated wrongly when you don't understand what the words mean as wholesome or unwholesome.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. Actually, the kusala is a grass, a very strong, hardy grass that when the stems are cut, the leaves of the grass are cut and dried, they have a serrated edge that's good enough to cut flesh, to cut bread, to cut all kinds of things.
Oh,
And
interesting.
kusala grass was the primary cutting tool for everybody in the time of the Buddha, because metal objects, I mean, kusala grass is probably a lot cheaper and a lot as long lasting as bronze.
Hmm.
That it only comes to the level of steel as when kusala grass would become abandoned. It still
Wow.
grows wild all over Thailand, all over Southeast Asia. There's some varieties that are close to it called lemongrass. Do you know what I mean by lemongrass? Lemongrass.
Somewhat. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so a big shoot of it here, and it just grows out. But be careful with the kusala, because if you walk by it, it'll cut your clothes.
Wow.
Now we're getting to it. Why would a grass that's so hardy and with serrated edges that's used in society as a cutting device, why would that be used as wholesome
Well, I
as
mean,
opposed
it's
to a kasala blade that was already old, worn out, and dull? So now you have the qualities, even in English, of sharp and dull.
right. Ah, okay then. Yeah. So
Okay.
Is the kusala sort of, so it's sort of like layering in concepts of like body, but then implicit in the idea of using grass, it can be used well, used poorly, and it eventually dies and is impermanent itself.
I don't think that that's in there because the Buddha only uses it in the sense that it can cut and is always translated as wholesome and unwholesome.
Okay.
All right. Now, why do we want to have something that cuts? We want to dissect. We want to cut into the Four Noble Truths. We want to take it apart. We want to really get a hold of what the cause of suffering is. We want to dissect that. We want to dissect the mind. We want to dissect the path and get down to the details of it so that we really, really understand it. That's the quality of the cutting, is to divide. Another word that we can give that when you hear this word, you'll say, aha, I know exactly what they're talking about. This word is diagnosis.
Right. Yeah, I know what you're talking
Two
about.
Greek words, okay? What are those two words? Diag is the same word as diagonal, which means to cut into something. The whole idea of angles and diangles have to do with cutting. And then gnosis, knowledge. You cut it open to know it. And
so
yet
penetrating knowledge.
Exactly. How are we going to have penetrating knowledge? We're going to take kusala grass and we're going to dig a hole in it and rip that thing open and pull it out inside, and we're going to take a deep look. And I use those broad gestures that way, just like a lion would. You see, because one of the major qualities that people bring when they come to Buddhism is that they come as victims.
Right.
And and they want help. They want somebody to do it for them. And one of the qualities of Zen is to keep rejecting the student. When the student wants something from the teacher constantly rejects the student.
Right.
And there's many ways. One of the ways that's done is that if the student is really in a hurry to come see his teacher, he won't arrange his shoes properly. The old master's looking out the window to see how the shoes are arranged, and when he sees that the kid was too excited to come see the teacher that he didn't arrange his shoes correctly, he won't answer the door.
What's the purpose of doing that? To mess with them so much?
Well, the whole quality is not messing with them, though that's a lot of fun. The quality is just to have them wake up.
Right.
One of them is you get some object in the hand, and they say you can have this if you can take it out of my hand.
Right.
Nobody's going to take that out of the teacher's hand unless the teacher wants them to.
Okay.
So, but by the way, that game is only played by those who want to cry and fuss and get the teacher to give it to them.
Right. So is the light coming to mind when thinking about a lion is pride and sort of bravery and stuff? Is this sort of a sense that the path isn't, because I mean, when I first got into Buddhism, I had this perception that it was a very demure sort of meek experience and all, but you listen to the lion's roar, or you listen to how the Buddha talks of himself as exalted, resplendent, the teacher of, Brahman alike. It's sort of, there is like very much a sense of like powerful, brave investigation rather than like meekly accepting what gets thrown at you, I guess.
Exactly so. In fact, I think that whole quality of meekness that has seeped into the Buddhism from the West is because of that underlying Christianity of victimhood. You need help on the outside. So if you can get meek and mild enough and accepting enough of all the bullshit that you keep getting hit with, then maybe some magic will happen to you and you'll become enlightened. If I
Right.
only endure and I only put up with this stuff, well, he's not even practicing the skill of getting out of his own way. This is more like the Matrix.
It's a bit of fighting with yourself and a bit of not just sort of like laying down to die, I guess. Because that's what sometimes being an arahant, from the sounds of it, seems like. I remember I was speaking to one friend. He's like, sometimes it seems like you're a warm pot plant, and like I guess mixed in with the perceptions of like accepting and all the Buddhist audio talks you have where it's these mixed voice people. Kind of really gets in your mind that you just sort of, I guess, like you're just going to take everything and you're just completely powerless, agencyless person.
Now, if we have the wrong idea about what enlightenment is, then we set our sights upon a goal that if we reach it, we're unhappy with it. And if we
Right.
don't, we're in a special kind of hell called Loserville.
Right. I'm not awakened. I can't get awakened. It's not for
Hmm
me. Why do I do this? Rah, rah,
There,
rah.
there is a sutta about that. It's either 56 or 57. It's the dog duty aesthetic. And that sutta is actually more about karma, but it certainly points to what we're talking about here, where it was actually an ox duty aesthetic and a dog duty aesthetic. Now, why they would choose to translate it that way, I'm not sure. But
Right.
I have never seen a cow duty ascetic, so I don't know them. But I have actually seen a group of dog duty ascetics in Hyderabad in India back in the 1970s. So they still existed at least until then. All right. And that what a dog duty aesthetic is that these aesthetics, they're, holy men, and they go off into their little cave together and study their scriptures and talk and do all kinds of things the way that a human would do. But when they go out on patrol, their job is to pretend to be a dog, which means walking on all fours, eating only food that comes off the ground. You don't eat food that's on a plate. And really other crazy stuff like that. And this is kind of like a penance.
Oh,
They
okay. Yeah, yeah.
okay,
Like
or
prostrations.
well, they do this intentionally with the idea that karma will be burned off.
Ah, right,
That
right.
these guys are somewhat associated with Jainism.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them a little bit.
Okay, so the Jains, I think, have cleaned up their act, but in the time of the Buddha, they were really, really heavy duty into self-flagellation and punishing the body and starving themselves, doing a particular meditation called the breathingless meditation, where they stopped up all of their holes so that you can't breathe. In other words, you literally pass out. They're doing these kinds of things. I mean, you hear that teenagers do those kinds of things sometimes in a group, but they had full-grown adult men doing it as an organized religious practice. All right, so just all kinds of things, but most of that has been given up by the Jains, but not everything. And the ideas behind it is this: if my behavior is perfect now, then why isn't my life perfect now?
Right.
The answer to that is old past karma. Well, let's get rid of that old past karma. I don't want to just sit here and suffer with it. So let's do something to speed up the burning of the old past bad karma. Let me sit here and beat myself half to death, or starve myself, or pick myself up by giant fish hooks and hoist myself into a tree, or hang myself on a cross, or do all kinds of things like this, because the idea is that speeds up the burning off of bad karma. You see how
Right.
crazy people can get with that idea of karma? Oh no.
Right.
If you do harm to yourself right now, it's not going to burn off old bad karma. It's just going to give you some new stuff to deal with.
Yeah, a lot of stuff I can imagine.
All right. So the dog duty aesthetic and all of those people who practice any sort of self-flagellation do so under the rubric of burning off old bad karma.
Mhm.
That's why the Buddha is immediately going to launch in the middle of this sutta into karma. You're going to teach
Right.
these dudes about it after he completely blows them away.
Mhm.
Okay? Because in the early part of the sutta, the dog duty aesthetic asks the Buddha the question, the big question. If I am really excellent at being a dog duty aesthetic, what will happen? And the
Mhm.
Buddha said the following: if you succeed at being an excellent dog duty aesthetic, then you in fact will be a dog. And if you fail at it, then you will roast in hell.
Wow.
Wow. You can imagine somebody that's been putting in 15 or 20 years all day long of doing this crap.
Yeah.
Wait
So
a minute. I'm doing a dog duty aesthetic for penance. I'm not doing it because I want to become a dog.
oh wow. That's so is the hell a personal hell, or is it an actual metaphysical hell?
It's called the loser.
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's our hell. Is that we lose. We fail.
Right.
We don't get in.
Mhm.
Okay. So, in fact, everyone creates their own hell. I have a Buddhist joke for you on that. Not the
Right.
best Buddhist joke, but the Buddhist joke is that you have a Christian, an atheist, and a Buddhist standing and waiting for something, and they start up a conversation, and the conversation very quickly goes with the Christians and the atheist, and the atheist is saying there ain't no hell, and the Christian is saying the hell there ain't. Buddha says hell, you're both in it.
right.
I
No,
imagine
that
he did
makes
that before he laughs, just as he laughs. Both of you are in hell right now.
right. Okay, so like a
Why?
fabricate.
Because we can label hell as any degree of unsatisfactoriness.
Right.
Or we can actually go right to the word of dukkha, because dukkha itself is hell.
Right.
And the distinction between dukkha and hell, I guess, is very, very minor, because you could think of hell as only a hell when there's somebody there. Well,
Right.
dukkha is kind of like that, except that when dukkha is only dukkha when I'm there.
Right. Ah, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the hell is only a hell when I put myself in it, and
Right.
I'm willing to do that as punishment for being a loser.
Right. Okay.
One of the things that I'd like to back up to now is something that I wanted to. You had touched on it, and I wanted to go back to it, and that is that the Dhamma needs, partly because it is um, counterintuitive.
Mhm.
And I say counterintuitive in the sense that things that are intuitive are instinctual. And in that regard, not only is the Buddha Dhamma counterintuitive, it's downright dangerous to instincts.
Right.
All right. So, knowing that it's counterintuitive, it sometimes will create doubt rather
Mhm.
than eliminate doubt.
Right.
All right. Why is that? Because it doesn't go along with the lies I've been told.
Yeah, it goes against everything. you really
It
told
almost
about.
goes against about just about everything.
Right.
Just about everything. So we need some verification. And here's how that verification works. The first verification is that there is the physical reality of the situation, whatever that might be. But the physical reality of it, for instance, that we have Skype, we've got computers, you can see in the background, we're speaking the same language, and there's a whole lot of input that you're getting that you know that you can trust because it's part of the reality that you know exists. All right. And that when I start to talk about it with students in the sense of physics and mathematics, I begin to paint a picture that the Dhamma is going to continue to fit in with physics all along the way, so that always we will have the physical reality that we can use as a basis of foundation no matter what.
Right.
As opposed to magic, you can't do that. Religion, you can't do that. Heavens and hells as places, you can't do that. But when we recognize that heavens and hells are mental states, and that they were mental states before people invented their own ideas of what they were on the outside world.
Right.
Okay, I remember really blowing a young, let's see, a Lao man. This was in, I was at the temple in Atlanta, Georgia. And that this particular room had all kinds of pictures of hell. Now, why they had those things there? But one of them was bodies on spears. Another one was bodies getting broken. Another one was bodies getting burned. You know, the whole idea of it. And in there was also a picture of a boy and a girl walking in a beautiful scenery with a fountain behind them. And that picture was there too. And I pointed out to this man that this too is hell.
Right.
And he wanted to know why. And I said, well, right now for you is hell because you want to be that guy and you're not.
Right. Okay.
So the hell is always on the inside, just like everything else. All of our experience is on the inside. And we can begin to see that to where all of the other stuff, for example, prestidigitation, magic that they want you to believe in because you can see it. Okay, but seeing is not believing. Full-on investigation, step by step. I want to, okay, you do that card trick, only this time I'm going to have 19 cameras, all of them high speed, all of them focused on every little thing you're doing. Now let's see what happens. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So this is what we mean is that when we do a full investigation of the Dhamma, it comes closer and closer to actual reality that can be tested. It is scientific to the point that you could go so far as to say that the Buddha was the very first scientist that's known in history.
Oh, okay.
And that what he figured out was a whole lot of stuff that had to do with the speed of light.
Okay.
What did he figure out about the speed of light? He figured out cause and effect. The Pali word is Ityapapajayata. All right. And Paticca is the sequence of events, but Ityapapajayata means with this there is that, and without this there is not that.
Right.
Now wash my hands again. With this there is that, and without this there is no that. That time space in there happens so quickly that it's almost, we think of instantaneous, but in fact it's not. It's got a speed limit to it. And now they have come to find out that that speed limit that once we measured as the speed of light is not the speed of light itself, it's the speed of causality, and that the first evidence that we had of causality was with light. Therefore, we're measuring light, but we're actually thinking we're measuring, or now we begin to see that it's not light actually we're measuring, it's causality.
Okay.
Even down to the point, and I've seen this, it's probably still on YouTube, they have a high-speed camera, and boy, is it high speed. It is so high speed that it's taking, like trillions of frames per second. Now, there's some ambient light already in this, but when they turn the laser on, you can see that thing go right down, because you know that a nanosecond is the amount of time that it takes for light to travel 11 inches. Did you know that?
Right.
One
I didn't,
nanosecond.
but
Light travels. Oh, now if we can break that down, and when we see that light hit that bottle, actually it was a Coke bottle, and start to disperse and radiate the way that it does, you can see actually at that level the cause and effect that the Buddha was talking about.
okay.
That this causes that, and that sequence of events is very fast. It's too fast for us to see without modern technology, but now that modern technology is there, it still verifies all of this. And so that's the first point that I want to make with you, so that anybody else listens to this tape, they can hear that there is this group of things, and that the foundation of it all is physical reality.
Right.
We're
Okay.
not going to tell you any bullshit that you can see is not true.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
The second thing is the relationship that we have together, and the teaching and the flow that comes with that, so that you can see that what I'm teaching is something that's part of me.
Right.
All right. And so that you can see that through that Dhamma, but that I give that Dhamma that is not mine, it comes from Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Right.
And now we're beginning to understand that there's a lineage, and that lineage goes right back to the Buddha. That every monk can trace his lineage back to the Buddha through the noble tradition, even though most of the people who ever go to a temple, and in fact many monks, do not ever get to deeper teachings.
Right.
Almost to the point, in fact, that it seems like some good teachers will set up roadblocks, stumbling blocks, things to make the student begin to think. And then when the student begins to figure out for himself anatta, and he starts to come to the teacher, that's when the teacher will then verify for that student that, that the Buddhist religion is a whole pile of horseshit, but guess what? In all of that horseshit, there's a real pony.
So shifting through the turd to find the diamond.
Right, exactly so. And not only that, but the student has stumbled upon it already, and is verifying that with the teacher. That's one of the methods of teaching. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says, no, we're not going to teach like that. We're going to actually give the noble Dhamma right out there. And those who will get it, and those who don't, won't. And so here's an example of that. I had a friend, David, who was a monk, and on one of the visits he had, I guess it was for visa, he found himself at the main Thai temple in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And there the abbot of this Thai temple was a Sri Lankan monk.
Right.
Who was the head of the Thai temple. Okay, well, if you've got a Sri Lankan that's the head of the Thai temple, you know that this Sri Lankan's got some power in Thailand as well as just Sri Lankan. Okay. And when David walked in there, this monk was talking to a Chinese woman whose husband had just died, and that because of the language difference, the Sri Lankan and the Chinese woman are speaking English, and David understands what they're talking about, and that the monk is consoling this old woman and telling her all kinds of things about how wonderful her husband was, and her husband's looking over her, and blah 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 blah. The very kind of same things that you might hear a Christian priest consoling a Catholic woman who's just lost her husband. And David said when he heard that, he says, I come to the wrong place. I have heard about, but I am really in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of that conversation, and the woman left, David introduced himself to this monk, and David mentioned that he had come from Wat Suan Mok. And David says, you wouldn't have believed the change that this man had that his whole demeanor and everything changed. It's like, finally, I found a noble.
Right. Oh, okay then.
Finally, and so that's almost how it goes, is that there are certain questions, and one of the questions is around Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, because here in Thailand he's so famous, and so those monks who know him will be able to communicate with each other immediately if both of them know Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, because they know that he's only going to teach Noble Dhamma, to where the old way of teaching the Noble Dhamma was to teach it only when the student was ready for it.
Right. So like
Rather than just laying
initiations
it
and
right
stuff.
out there and see who's going to pick up on it.
Right.
All right. The Dalai Lama, in fact, did exactly that bait and switch thing also. And he would do it in the old days with Western journalists. Most of the Western journalists who went to talk to Dalai Lama wanted to hear about magic, and so he taught them magic.
Right.
And in fact, a well-known guy named Stephen Batchelor actually went through that magical system in Tibet. And when he realized the problems with it, he did not get the kind of guidance that he needed to figure out what the Buddha Dhamma was all about. And so he walked away thinking that no one in Tibet knew anything and that he knew the Dhamma better than any of them. And he didn't realize that, oh no, he had just cracked a door open and the whole crowd was sitting in that room and he wouldn't go in to see what it was.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so there's dangers with that bait and switch.
Right.
But the bigger danger is that when ordinary people begin to hear some of the Noble Dhamma, it looks like that we're renegades, outlaws, anarchists,
Radicals.
revolutionaries.
Yeah, that's a I've found I seem to be drawn to those types of, well, I used to call them cowboy dharma people, like like the people who went against the grain that was going on, and I'd be like, well, this person says it's something completely different, and when I drilled into it, it would usually be a different way of working with it than the Burmese style that I was accustomed to, and I'd be like, oh, this is so much better.
Now, there's something that we have to understand, that every one of those dudes is doing exactly the right thing. They're banging their heads against magical Buddhism, and they're saying, wait a minute, there's got to be a pony in here someplace.
Right.
And so they start inspecting a bunch of horse shit, and what they do is they wind up being covered with it. And that's what, but you got to congratulate these guys, because they're all off on the right thing. Why? Because their only two possibilities is, one, dig into that horse shit and see if there is a pony in it, or the other one is sit down in front of it and pray to it and hope the pile of horse shit does you some good someday.
Yeah. Turd turns into a diamond one night when you go to sleep.
Yeah, it's going to happen to me just like it happened to Ananda. I'm going to go to sleep because I didn't get into a conference in Bango. I'm awake.
Hey, it could happen.
Yeah, if you spent 25 years with the Buddha pounding you in the head trying to get the Dhamma in, and you wouldn't let it in, and then finally he croaks, and now they won't even let you in their old boys club until you figure out the right magic words to use. There's a password to get in, and every noble knows that password.
Right. Ah, okay. So it's sort of like a self-selecting principle. You recognize true Dhamma in other people.
Right. You could use the rubric of it takes one to know one.
Yeah. A fisherman always notices a fisherman from afar. Okay.
Yes. So that's the way to look at it is, nobles, they they put out a an air about them that has a a different quality to it. So,
Right.
and by the way, it's always got joy. That's one of
Right.
the ways of looking at it is that there's joy at it because they kind of like what's happening right now.
Right.
So, um, we've gotten two of those things now. With me goes back to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, and from that down to the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
Now about maybe 80% of the doubt, because all that we're saying fits. It fits with
Mm-hmm.
reality, and it fits with the storyline all the way back to the Buddha. And not only that, but it looks like that it's getting deeper and closer together. There's only one last thing, and that's for the student himself to really click on it and say, aha, I've got it now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know. And then when you have all five of those things click together, what will happen is the mind becomes unified through lack of doubt. That this is
Mm-hmm.
part of the fruit of Sotapan is the eradication of doubt.
Right. The complete faith in the Dhamma, and you're
It's
destined to
no
awaken
longer
within 7
faith, it's
lives.
not faith. Faith ripens into direct knowledge.
Right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Faith was before. Okay, do you know the story of Einstein and the various attempts at getting an eclipse to where they could finally get a photo
No, I
to
don't.
prove that? Okay, basically, I just told you the story that light emanating in clusters of stars and nebula behind the object of the sun will get
Mm-hmm.
bent and dispersed, so that in a full eclipse, when the sun is in fact blackened out by the moon, then those stars that were hidden by the sun will be stretched out in a halo, because the sun itself has gravity, and as the starlight from this sun going this direction is coming towards the sun, it gets bent just a little bit. And
Okay.
so by the time we see it on Earth, now, Einstein knew that on paper, he knew it mathematically, but when the photographic evidence came in, then we knew.
Right.
Okay, that's what we're looking for, is that kind of verification for you so that you can
The
see it.
direct
You
spirit.
got it.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I've had experiences somewhat like that. Like recently, I was contemplating while I was doing the mind daily noting sort of thing. I'd be aware that just like when I'm just doing something by assumptions, like it's if I'm cleaning and I feel like stopping and I actually do, I sit for a second. I'm like, why did I actually stop? And it was like, oh, I just sort of unquestionedly decided that I wanted to sit down. And then it's like, why did I actually want to sit down? And it's because I was craving something else besides cleaning, and I was, being averse to the actual cleaning. So that was sort of like, and then that craving made me change my behavior, and then I end up sitting down, and it's only a story because of craving.
Okay. You could also back that up by just coming to the conclusion, or let us use the wording to pin it to the point of wanting things that you don't have,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's the definition of suffering. And so the wanting things that we don't have um, is, let us say, it fits our language better.
Right.
Nobody uses the word craving.
Right.
All
Okay.
right, that's not a common word in the English language, but it might have been when those books were translated. I mean, Buddhist books are getting old like King James stuff. But the right way of talking about it is literally wanting things that we don't have.
Right.
All right. There's two words in there, tanha and upadana.
Mm-hmm.
Upadana, you can see the word dana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you know the word is
Generosity.
given. Yes, okay, so giving something. So
Right.
upadana means taking.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
Yes,
So
grasping,
Upa
or
is So upa is a negation. So like
Well, not so much of a
doing.
negation as it's a raw act. It's not this act. It's this act. Okay. And the other one is tanha, and tanha is closer to the feeling. So the feeling of, it starts with the feeling of liking, and liking rots into, which is just a feeling, ripens or rots into, I don't use the word ripen, I use the word rot because that's what's actually happened. It rots into wanting something in the present. Now that's thirst. In fact, you can, if you know anything about Pali or even just Indo-European languages in general, you can see where the word tanha has the quality of thirstiness or wanting. Okay. And so that's the quality of tanha, whereas upadana is that action that's taking because we're so thirsty. So two guys are in the desert, and one of them gets the water bottle and is quenching his thirst, and the other one grabs that water bottle out of his hand. The grabbing of the bottle out of his hand is the upadana. The tanha was why he did it, was because he was so thirsty. Okay. All right. So this is how that works, and that this comes out of an ignorant feeling. That
Delusion.
perhaps you weren't as thirsty as you thought you were. Perhaps you can wait your turn.
Right. Okay.
So this is how it goes, and that almost always when people express feelings, they express feelings not with the words that they were originally intended to be used, because those words now in our language have grown old and familiar. And so we want to express our anger and express it in an emotional way so you get a quality of my feeling. And one of the ways of doing that is with grandiosity. All right. So if I was chased by two guys, every time I change the story, I'm going to add people chasing me.
Right. It's two guys, four guys, eight guys.
Right, and then it's a crowd, right? So that's what happens, and that happens in many, many ways. So in the process of us beginning to watch our language as a door to the mind, we can start to look for these small usage of words, like feeling words that lead to grandiosity, these little lies, or selfishness. In other words, am I using a language that has to have a me in it, or can the language that's being used be used without personalities? That in fact there's a sutta about this, number 139 in the Majjhima Nikaya, which talks about how to teach the Dhamma without using personalities.
Right. Okay.
All right. So starting to watch your language, to take
right
feeling words out, taking personal pronouns out. Here's an example of that. On regular basis, I get emails from various teachers at Spirit Rock announcing whatever they're doing for their meditation retreats at Spirit Rock. And one of the things that I started doing, just because it became clear, I've started now adding up all the occurrences of I in these emails that are coming from teachers at Spirit Rock. You would expect them to already start guarding their language.
Right.
And yet I would like to announce, and I'm going to be here on this day, and I have a wonderful surprise for you. Why can't you speak without having all of this self-reference?
Me, myself, and I.
So the term that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa uses is nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. And in fact, that particular statement can be seen to come right out of the suttas. Nothing is worth clinging to as I, me, or mine. Now, this clinging that's used there is that gotta have it or a sense of ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a wonderful talk that I'm going to give.
Right.
All right. So it has the quality of ownership. That's that quality of upadana. All right.
I'm sharing my wisdom of the Dharma. I'm sharing my knowledge of the Dhamma.
Yes, right.
Right.
And so um, this this was a game that became noticeable. Gosh, before Buddhadasa's time, and the game comes from the game of baby in a baby shower. You know that
Mm-hmm.
when a woman is pregnant, that one of her friends will get all of her friends to get a baby shower together and shower her with the gifts, and that they're going
Right.
to sit around and open the presents, and everybody has fun, and they eat cake, but probably not beer, and
Right.
and the game, one of the games they play is that no one there can say the word baby.
Oh, okay.
So it's a mindfulness trick that they play, and that any time that one woman will say the word baby, everybody stops and has a hilarious laugh to her expense. She feels shy. She'll start watching her mouth again, and 3 minutes later, somebody will use the word baby. They're in a baby shower.
Right. That's actually quite intelligent. I like
Yes.
that.
So you're now at an I, me, my shower
Mm-hmm.
all the
So,
time.
yeah, okay. So, I get it. So
Ah,
the restriction.
you do,
Ah,
huh?
okay. So the restriction, the idea behind the restriction is like it makes you look at your natural tendencies with speech, and in by doing so, you realize when you're identifying with a situation or a result or placing identification in a conversation.
Exactly so. So
Okay.
this is one of the qualities of noble speech, is that
Okay.
noble speech generally takes personality out. Noble speech also takes feeling out so that there is no grandiosity.
So takes feeling and what was the first one? Sorry.
I, me, my.
Yeah. Ego.
Take the take personality out. Begin to watch for it.
Okay. So I just want to just going back to the Anapanasati Sutta again. I
Yes.
was there you go. I again passages. Now I'm not going to get far out. This this event is going to transpire a lot. So
with mindfulness
right, yes,
as
of course.
kusala. This is
Mm-hmm.
kusala, cutting those
Right.
sentences out.
Mm-hmm. So just going in to the Anapanasati,
Mm-hmm.
Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says that, and your website as well, there's stuff about it's not a one to 16 step progression. They're actually uh, tetra like tetrahads of practice elements that each work on the Satipatthana Sutta. So that fulfill an aspect of the Satipatthana Sutta, sorry. And then by fulfilling Satipatthana via Anapanasati, you get 7 enlightenment factors that it brings on to deliverance and knowledge.
Knowledge and deliverance.
Right. So I just want
Deliverance does
to.
not bring about knowledge.
All right.
Cause
Knowledge
and
and
effect
deliverance.
relationship
Yep.
there. You have to
Oh,
dissect and
okay.
see that, right? Knowledge causes deliverance. Deliverance does not cause knowledge.
Well, so it's built into the language itself, even like right there. It's like an internal set of principles. So cause and effect. I mean, obviously, the language chosen will reflect cause and effect just to make it logical. But I mean, it's actually you could just observe these principles even on a micro scale in the Dharma. So like cause and effect, that completely changes the meaning, like you just said. Okay.
That's exactly correct. Exactly correct.
Right.
And it it is worthwhile for the students to see how things are structured so that they continue to keep the correct cause-effect relationship. That
Right.
cause-effect relationship is the Dhamma of
Right.
watching what causes what. Now, a really, really humorous and clear example of that was one of the people posted on a stream entry on Reddit,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was pointing out the first three fetters as what it took to be a stream enterer.
Mm-hmm.
But you could clearly see that the guy was just doing it off the top of his head as best he could. And the most important, the easiest way to see that is that he did not have personality view as the first fetter in his list.
Right.
He got them out of order, which meant that
Right.
he did not understand that you cannot be free of doubt until you know who you are.
Right.
Period. I mean, just that. How can you do that? Cause and effect relationship right there. You
Right.
cannot
So
become free of doubt until you have a clear understanding of the personality view. You have to examine that, and in fact, examine the Four Noble Truths.
okay.
So, what I'm telling you now, I'll just give you a little bit of, but we'll get into it deeper.
Right.
And what I'm referencing now is the Asava Sutta number 2
Yep.
about
Oh, I printed that out.
what
I
is
grabbed that
worthy,
actually.
what is worthy of wise attention.
Yep.
What is
Okay.
not worthy of wise attention is all of the things that we already call hindrances.
Right.
And what is worthy of attention to, and the reason that they're not worthy of attention is because they don't lead to freedom.
Okay.
And what is worthy of attention is worthy of attention because it leads to freedom.
Right.
All right, and so what is worthy of paying attention to is the Four Noble Truths. This is suffering.
Right.
This is the cause of suffering. This is the end of suffering. All right. By doing that, we see a lot of people don't really get the point that all human activity, especially the higher, let us call it more sophisticated it gets,
Mm-hmm.
the more this is true that all human behavior is based in suffering and they don't know it. That's
Right.
why it's ignorance.
Right.
Okay,
Avidya.
they want things they can't have, and they think if they can have what they want, then I won't suffer. Therefore, not having what I want is suffering, but they get it
Right.
backwards. They've got the cause effect relationship backwards.
Oh, okay.
All right. And by getting it straightened out, we recognize the wanting of something is the cause of suffering, not the object.
Okay.
All right. The
Um.
wanting of it.
So I'm gonna try and explain something. I don't know how clear it'll be, but could you see the Dhamma as like it's it's both small and large in the sense that like on the macro scale, the way to ending suffering is by the Four Noble Truths, but in each interaction of like each interaction you can sort of see if there's suffering there, you can realize it by going through that Four Noble Truth again for each moment of suffering as well. And it is because I read a bit of Nibbana for everyone. That's what Bhikkhu Buddhadasa says. That Nibbana is those little moments of when we're not
No
operating
heat.
through the lens
Yes.
of avijja. We're
Mhm.
operating through the lens of the Four Noble Truths.
Exactly. Or just relaxing, just because in fact
Right.
people can just go thoughtless for a moment, just sigh with relief. In fact, um, there's a very humorous scene in a movie called Kung Fu Panda 3. And the
Right.
third movie, the first one, he learns how to become Kung Fu. He's a panda, and pandas like sweet food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so his dad was a noodle vendor, but his dad was also a duck because he was an adopted son. So the Kung Fu master used food to teach him how to be a Kung Fu master by keeping, and you can see them dancing all over the place where the Kung Fu master finally gets it every time and only lets the Kung Fu student get it when he's done something well. So the second movie is the establishment then of this panda being a kung fu master.
Right.
And then the third movie is the ultimate of the waking up of this guy with the question of who am I? Because in the third movie is when his actual father, a real panda, is introduced into the movie set,
Right.
and that he has to figure out that he's not the son of a noodle and who am I, etc., like that. And so
Okay.
here's the thing that makes this extremely cute, and that is that the pandas themselves, which this kung fu panda has been orphaned away from, they've got their own kung fu.
Oh, okay.
And it's anapanasati. And so, what his actual father, the old panda, has to teach his son is how to sigh.
Oh, that's
And how to relax, and how to
right.
roll over on the ground, and how to play. Okay.
Right.
And then later in the movie, Kung Fu Panda 3 has an epiphany because now um, he's set up to become confused.
Mm-hmm.
Is he the son of a noodle vendor? Is he son of a kung fu panda? Is he a kung fu panda, or is he the noble uh, dragon uh, panda that he turns into by magic on the screen, etc., like that? And the answer is he's none of those things, and he's all of those things
Right.
in whatever moment that he is that.
Right.
And that who he is keeps moving around. And I thought that was really brilliant, that movie.
Yeah.
They must have had an Asian on the staff to write that film,
Mm.
to get
Yeah,
that kind of
that's
plot sequence in there, because it's really, really excellent to teach Western kids a little bit of Asian wisdom that way.
right. So
I
the self is illusionary in the sense that it arises dependently like everything else.
mm-hmm, exactly so. So when
Right.
it arises in your speech, be aware of that.
Right, because that's sort of like a direct sense of suffering, isn't it? Or the
Mm-hmm.
direct precursor to suffering.
Well, it begins to show how suffering, big or small, gets mixed into things so easily and so frequently.
Right. Okay.
That is,
Lately I've been sorry.
go ahead.
I just I've been paying attention as well to like um how often a conversation is like a factual discussion, whereas how long it is like comparing opinions and reactions. So it's like I liked this, I also like this, or I dislike this, I like this. Like it's reacting to that. It is all subjective, and it's nothing. And I'm paying attention to how often like that sort of default mode of reacting to things is in terms of me, myself, and I.
This is a lot of what is needed to be done. The student needs to really start to dissect the sentences, to slow our speech down, to
Right.
hear what is being said, to
Mhm.
monitor every word. Is it, in fact, what is needed to be said, and is it correct?
Right.
And
Okay.
so, that's a really important way of speak. In fact, to continue to introduce something to you, there are there are two kinds of language. In fact, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, I think, a chapter of one of the books that's out, but it was just a talk by itself, um, where he likens speech that ordinary people use is a speech that's like a balloon language.
Hmm.
And it's a balloon language because it's easy to operate with, it's light, it's airy fairy, everybody can manage it, and it will blow up in your face, guaranteed.
Right. Okay.
And the other kind of speech is noble speech. It is right, it's correct, it's sharp, it's true, and can be thought of as knife speech because its intention is to cut through the balloon,
So cut through a vidya.
to cut through anicca, to cut through
Yeah.
anatta, to cut through dukkha, to see the sources and the cause of suffering. So this, and the knife itself is the investigation, and we
Hmm.
investigate it through language.
Right. Okay.
So start to monitor the language that you're using.
Yep. Okay.
That in
Uh,
fact you could see that they do that. We do that with children anyway, in the sense that, kid, it doesn't matter how you feel. Just
mhm.
behave yourself.
Right. And somewhere along the line, that goes out the window, doesn't it? That lesson is conveniently forgotten.
Well, actually, what happens is that it's the wrong message because, but the results are good in the sense that the kid shuts up.
Mhm.
But it's insufficient because the child is still suffering and he carries his suffering around silently, not paying any attention to it.
Right.
Now, the correct solution, not sure, but eventually the child needs to be taught that all of the problems that you've got, you make yourself by the way you feel
Right.
about things. And when you can learn how to be joyful, then life is easy. And when you cry and pout, life is
Life
tough.
aside. Hmm. Okay. Um. So, so just going back to the tetrad, just sort of structuring and links between Satipatthana and Anapanasati. Um, I noticed Bhikkhu Buddhadasa recommends like a period, like a way of doing anapanasati for busy people, I think he calls it, or for lay people, and it's the first step on each four, like the first step for each four frames of reference.
Actually, I would say yes, that's true, but I would go so far as to say instead of doing one in each, do two in each.
Okay, then.
And it makes sense that way. For instance, instead of doing just in breath with the long breath and out breath with the long breath, you do two of them in the sense
Right.
that you know your long in breath and you know your long out breath. Later, we'll do investigation of the body, but you see you're already past that. The next
Right.
one then would be, uh, let's go directly to the mind, that when the mind wanders away from the breath, you're experiencing the mind at least enough to know that it's wandered away from the breath.
Hmm.
It's better to add the next step of that, which is gladdening the mind. Go ahead and tell yourself it's really good that you found this. And so that's, in that regard, I would say instead of the very, very simplest is what he's saying is do one of each. And what I'm
Right.
saying is you're already to the point of do at least two.
Okay. All right. So just a question on gladdening the mind. So that's
Mm.
stuff like, good on you, you did a good job, and sort of being, would it also be sort of inclining your perception to the positive aspects that are there, and then trying to like shift? So like if I'm sitting breathing upright and my shoulder's hurting, but then there's like all this other loveliness, like in this sort of corner, going to that part of it to glad the mind.
Um, let's let's look at it this way.
Right.
If you've got two guys that are sitting in the same posture, in the same position, and have the same part of their body hurting,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them has the mental attitude of victim, and the other one has the attitude that I'm a tough lion, what's going to be the difference?
The tough lion probably sits through the whole thing.
Well, one of the things a tough lion may say is that, that shoulder's hurting, but I'm bigger than that shoulder. That
Right.
shoulder is not my boss.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a little pain. Let me adjust it a little bit. Say, there now, you're okay. But you're not in charge. What about the
Right.
victim? What's the victim? Oh, my poor shoulder. Oh, it hurts. Which means that shoulder completely controls my mental state.
Right. Ah, okay. Okay.
So yes, in fact, the Buddha Dhamma is a very, very simple process of turning yourself from being a victim into a lion. But in order to do that, what that means is that you become bigger than who you used to be. Who you used to be needs to be supported by the outside world. Once you become a noble, then you recognize the needs that all of these victims are around. And your intention would be the following. Immediately, you want them to just go away. You don't want to be around them. You like your seclusion. Being a solitary lion is a whole lot better than a lion have to mess with a whole bunch of victims. Okay, so that's one thing. All right. The other thing then would be that we recognize that they have needs, and so we fill those needs only up to a point.
Right.
And that point is that when it becomes expensive for us, the Buddha even says that when royalty, the kings, merchants, lay people like that come to talk to him and ask him questions, he always gives them what they come for. But he does so with the intention to dismiss them quickly.
Right.
Now, he does not do that with monks because he knows that the monk can just sit down and that's all that's needed. When people come like royalty or whatever, they want the Buddha to pay attention to them, to give them something. They're coming as royal victims now.
Right.
So there's a difference in intention like that. But ultimately, in the position then that the Buddha is with the monks, is that his intention is to not help them other than to help them to see.
Right.
To point out to them what the skills that they need to be developed so that they can let me experiment with something.
That's okay.
I just got a message saying that Danny had called. But I don't know what to do. Oh, it says add to the call. Do you mind if I add Danny to our call?
No, go ahead.
Because I've never been able to do that with the new Skype, to be able to record and to add. Well, hello, Danny. We figured it out.
Hey.
This is Ashley. He lives in Perth, Western Australia, and this is Danny. He's in Bristol.
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you, Danny.
Nice to meet you too, Ashley.
Alrighty.
So we were covering some basics of Anapanasati.
Great.
And also basis of self. And I thought that I had, since I had mentioned to him, let us call it a party game. And the party game is the party game of young women who are getting together because one of their friends is having a baby, and so they'll have a party, and that party is called a baby shower. And in
Sure.
that party, one of the games they play is nobody can say the word baby.
Okay.
If anybody says the word baby at a baby shower, all the women stop what they're talking about. Everybody starts to laugh because that's the whole point of playing the game. Okay. So
Uh-huh.
that game then can be adapted to the Dhamma to start watching our language,
Great.
to start taking I, me's, and mine's out of language.
Whew. Okay.
Start paying attention. Start looking at what we're doing. Start
Uh-huh.
analyzing and dissecting.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay.
I have noticed an
You
increased
have.
awareness. I have. I just had a baby.
And see what the afterbirth looks like is hilarious.
One has noticed.
There has been the occasion.
There has been the occasion where there has been more awareness of those words as I'm using them.
Mm-hmm. Does take some mindfulness. This is Dhamma language, and so we were talking about Dhamma language of being two kinds, and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has an article about this. One he calls balloon language, which is ordinary language that everybody uses.
Mm-hmm.
It's airy-fairy, it's light, it's easy to blow up. It's real Dhamma with a little balloon, but we can fill it full of hot air, make it bigger than it ought to be, and then it'll blow up in our face.
Mm-hmm.
That's ordinary language. And then Dhamma language is kusala, or wholesome, which means that it cuts. It's a diagnostic. And so begin to use Dhamma language, because Dhamma language has to be inspected word by word for the following. One is that no feelings in there, no me in there, and that it's verifiable, it's true. And so by having this noble speech, which is part of the Eightfold Noble Path, takes right attitude in order to maintain right speech. And so starting to pay attention to everything that's said, we begin to get bored. Use the word we there, you heard that. From time to time, fatigue will set in. And then it's just too much work.
Okay. Which way around is too much work? Sorry.
Too much work to listen to every word that's said, to make sure that there's no I, me, or my in there, no feelings in there, etc. It's hard work in the beginning. It's not an easy task. And so do it on schedule rather than doing it all the time, because one winds beating themselves up until you begin to get mindful enough to where when the word is said, you chuckle because you're happy to hear when it comes up.
Right.
Like the baby. All right. This is not a way of self-flagellation.
Right.
But do recognize that those words are built into the language, and we commonly use them ignorantly. That this is part of ignorance, is our language.
Sure.
In fact, this thing called verbal sankara that the Buddha talks about is so important. The language we use.
Right.
When we listen to it carefully. All right. So now that we've caught you up to where we were also discussing the last thing was with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talking about how to practice anapanasati so that we can fit in more, because you see, many students will think that you start at step 1, then you do step 2, and then you do step 3, and then you do step 4, and then you do step 5, and then you do step 6, because after all, that's how the books have them. That's how it's described in the book. That's not possible, though.
Okay.
And so one of the things that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has had people experiment with is to do like 1, 5, 9, and 13 together. And I'm saying, oh no, the best way to do it is 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, 10, and 13, 14 as a beginner. That's the way that the beginner adds things. And then, because you can see 1, 2, and then you skip the next two parts. And what are the next two parts in the body? That is full experience of the body. And then the fourth one, the most difficult, is tranquilizing or peacefulizing the body to get the body to be in full relaxation, no tension, just a pleasurable body. All right, you can have that from time to time, but to be able to practice to get that all the time is very difficult, especially when people try to do it with sitting postures.
Yeah.
Okay, sitting long times, 8, 10, 12 hours trying to get the body tranquilized don't work. People will bust up their legs. They can do some real damage that way. So you can think of it like that, is the higher numbers are for more advanced practice. You can't tranquilize the body until you learn how to control the mind, because the mind is what's going to relax the body. In fact, the relaxation of the body is part of the nibbana.
Right.
All right, back to the Kung. I think we've already talked about Kung Fu Panda 3, where the daddy panda is teaching his son real panda Kung Fu with the out breath. Now that's how you relax the body, but you have to relax the mind in order to relax, to do that out breath. That sigh takes real mental discipline. Why? Because everybody forgets to do it. We have to have the mental discipline to remember, oh, this is nice. Oh, this is a really good here now. So let's go on just a little bit with that. Also, we need to practice especially number 9 and number 10 together, because as we begin to experience the mind, we'll want to continue to gladden it. That it needs that gladdening quality. Why? Because this gladdening of the mind is actually the second aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path of a change of attitude. If we cannot gladden the mind, then we've got wrong attitude. I forgot to wash my breath again. Oh, this meditation stuff is so boring.
I said baby again.
Yeah. In excelsis Deo. So, the gladdening is really so important quality. The next one up at the high, the 13 and 14, that's here's the thing. Some people may think that there is a confusion or a disagreement between the Anapanasati Sutta and the Satipatthana Sutta when it comes to the Dhammanupassana, that fourth element. All right. Why? Because Anapanasati talks about it specifically as anicca. Really, really deep anicca. Watch things rot. Watch things fall apart. Watch things die. And watch getting rid of stuff. Okay, those are the 4 steps. And we say, how can that be reference to the way that it's talked about in this Satipatthana Sutta, which, by the way, the first one is the hindrances themselves. Well, once we get the hindrances cleaned out, then the next one, things that we're going through, and this is kind of important, is that in the Satipatthana Sutta, it talks about the 5 aggregates. Well, the 5 aggregates is nothing but a surface level way of looking at Paticca Samuppada. All 5 of those aggregates, and here's the thing that's really funny. Why do they use the 5 aggregates if we're talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Especially when you see the relationship. because the four foundations of mindfulness have the body, the feeling, the mind, and the mind's objects, to where the five aggregates have the body, the feeling, consciousness, perception.
Right.
And what?
You're waiting.
And Sankara.
Right.
Okay, which is also what, and the Sankara, you see, there's bodily Sankara, but there's also mental or emotional Sankara, as well as verbal Sankara. So what we're really saying here is that by the Satipatthana mentioning the five aggregates, he's actually pointing at the full Satipatthana.
Okay.
Okay, now, well, no, it makes it easy.
It does.
Yes, because
I'm
you
sure
say,
it does when it's
oh,
understood.
because it's right, because it's one step at a time.
Okay.
Okay, we go one step at a time down to these levels. So the next part about the Satipatthana Sutta is the Four Noble Truths themselves, as listed as the Four Noble Truths. And yet in the Anapanasati Sutta, we practice the Anapanasati for the fulfillment of the Satipatthana, which has the Four Noble Truths built right into the Sutta. And we practice that for the fulfillment of the seven factors of enlightenment. So you begin to see how all of this stuff fits right together. It's
I feel like
all
this would be really useful as a diagram.
all right. It's all actually in the Satipatthana and the Anapanasati Sutta. Those two sutras, you go through that and you can make a diagram. I've got it right here. I've
Yeah.
to put it out on paper. Just getting the Paticca Samuppada with all the references in it, it winds up looking like a whole bunch of snakes crawled onto my paper.
Yeah.
So, yes, so you can see then that the Four Noble Truths is worthy of investigation.
Right.
Sure.
And that investigation is when it's constant, when you keep coming back and doing that investigation over and over and over again, it becomes an enlightenment factor to keep looking at the Four Noble Truths. Okay, by keep doing that, you begin to get a habit going, a dedication going, a rhythm going, an energy going. Either it's going to be a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, up, 2, 3, 4, up, 3, 4.
I'll take the first, please. I'll take option A.
Well, actually, the Dhamma is a waltz, but it's in 4/4 time. Little musical joke. Okay.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, we have Four Noble Truths, and we have four powers, and we have the four tetrads, and we have, it just goes on and on and on. Four foundations of mindfulness, four
postures.
The four postures, the four requisites, the four jhanas. It's on and on and on and on for this, that, and the other thing. So, in that regard, the Dhamma is in 4/4 time, but the way you practice it is in waltz time.
So we can do the 3 steps of the waltz in each bar and then take a breath.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Well, I've always done the oomph, and I don't care whether there's 1 or 2 pas. You know what I'm talking about?
As a tuba player, sure.
Yeah, I'm a tuba player.
So just one question regarding the last tetrad, where it talks about you examining impermanence and then examining the fading of perception. I was just wondering if you could go into a bit more detail about that.
Getting a little advanced. That's a little bit much for now, but I'll give you a tidbit or two. All right?
Right.
Basically, um, impermanence is best translated as not just things are temporary as if it were scientific. All right, that there's actually some emotional loading in there that needs to be looked at. All right, for instance, this laptop is temporary, but I've been banging on it. I mean, in fact, the A key and the shift key are all worn down, etc., like that. So it's changing, but the emotional baggage is that even though those kind of temporary things are happening as they're rotting away, really it's the maintaining of the laptop throughout the day that we have to maintain a laptop. That in fact a laptop is dukkha because it's difficult to maintain. All right, or let us say that it's temporary. So let's look at temporariness is not temporary just because it's temporary. It's temporary because it's hard to maintain. That's what makes temporary not a good thing. It's temporary, which means we don't want it to be temporary. We want to maintain it.
Okay.
And things are hard to maintain. This is a review for you, Danny.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had this before. Remember, Brahma Shiva?
I'm not sure I remember those words, but it feels familiar.
Vishnu. Difficult. Okay, so temporary things are difficult to maintain.
Right.
The way to look at dukkha is that it's difficult to endure.
Right.
Why is it difficult to endure? It's because we don't like it. In fact, if I want something and I don't have it, there's an element of not liking. A lot of people say, well, I like something, I like it. Yeah, you like it if you are willing to just like it as liking it. But if you like it and want it, now you're suffering.
Right.
Okay? So that means then that suffering is things that are difficult to endure. Whether it's an ache, a scratch, a pain, a bad word somebody's saying to you, recognition you're getting old, all kinds of things are difficult to maintain, difficult to endure because they were already difficult to maintain.
We're totally screwing ourselves over.
In fact, you can see that there's a deep relationship psychologically between temporariness and suffering.
Right.
Because one's difficult to maintain, the other one is difficult to endure. Now, this next part is a little one that's a little bit difficult to understand if we're working with all these difficulties. And that is, in reality, the birth of something, like the birth of a baby, is also difficult. It's difficult to birth something. Whether you're birthing the blues or birthing a new political party or birthing a self. That's also difficult. All right? And by birthing a self, we build that self, though we're in the real habit of it, we're really experts of it, but it's difficult to build that self, and we need that self in order to do the clinging. Without a self, there cannot be any clinging. We can go to wanting, but to cling, we need a self.
Right.
Okay, and the self then becomes the container for the actual dukkha or the suffering. No self, no suffering.
Right.
Okay,
so you can.
So in fact, there's difficulty in all three: the difficulty to maintain, difficult to endure, and the difficult to create.
Could I just something I've heard about with is the three characteristics sort of thing. So
I just went through and the Pali word is trilokana. That's the three characteristics. Let's have a waltz now.
yeah. That's what I wanted to just go over something. Is it so? Is the relationship between the three characteristics linked and causal? So impermanent to dukkha, and then the ending of that the impermanence to dukkha loop which will continue to go on, is the realization of anatta. So it's sort of like a framework by looking at these three characteristics, or looking at those two characteristics gives rise to three, or are they all simply characteristics that we can examine phenomena with?
Well, they're not related with cause-effect relationship that's easy to see.
Right.
But they are related at a deeper level. Here's one of the ways, and so what we're actually doing is we're trying to get a conceptual idea or a way of looking at it so that we can grasp it or get an understanding of it. So I'm going to offer that to you in the sense of, rather than 1, 2, 3 in a line, we're going to draw dots so that it looks like that actually what we're doing is a kind of a choice, or let us use the letter Y. So you can go from the stem up to the Y point, or the fork in the road, and then you choose to grow one way or the other.
Right.
Okay. And in that regard, anicca can either go to dukkha or it can go to anatta. Your choice.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Your choice. Anicca leads to either dukkha or anatta, and if it doesn't lead to anatta, the default is into dukkha, because if you do have a self, the self will suffer.
Right.
No suffering.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So that's one way of looking at it. There's another way of looking at it, and that way is to look at it as a sequence of events, or let us just say a sequence of words that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has put together that all of his students learn as a sequence of words.
Right.
Normally the Trilokana only has 3. Okay, anicca, dukkha, anatta. But the next one in the line is tatatha. The next one is sunyata, and the sixth one is atamayata. Anicca, dukkha, anatta, tatatha, sunyata, and atamayata. We throw those big tas at the end of it because the Thai language is built that way. No, it's easy. You can see, because you already know these concepts, the tatatha is to be here now. If you come to this present moment without a self, if you come to this present moment with a self, you come with dukkha. If you come to this present moment with no self, then there is no dukkha, and now you have this present moment.
Oh.
And this present moment and your self and everything else is empty.
Right.
But you cannot see emptiness until you can see this present moment to recognize everything is empty. And what is it empty of? 2 things. It's empty of a self, which is fairly easy to understand.
Yep.
At least intellectually. And the second one is the aha, and that is everything is empty of a purpose or a meaning.
Right.
Because all of our rights, rules, regulations, and in fact everything that has to do with Silabhata Paramasa out of the nesting instinct, we begin to see here all of that stuff that's the horse shit.
That's the bullshit.
That's the bullshit. Right. The bullshit is that there is no meaning to anything. There really is no meaning. And the only meaning that can be is the meaning that I give to it. Do I do that ignorantly or do I do it wisely? If I do it wisely, I don't do so much of it.
Okay.
And if I do it ignorantly, we'll do it a lot. In the sense of giving things meaning. Okay? If you want to look at it like that, all magic is making connections between drawing a line between 2 dots that are really in reality not connected.
Right.
There's got to be a different pathway to get from here to there because it's not direct. as we talked about before, if a magician does a magic trick and everybody is spellbound and everybody saw what he did and they were marveling with it, that's not the same thing as taking 16 video cameras and all focusing on his hands, and those video cameras are all ultra high speed with good lighting. And now we watch that trick and we're going to see actually the trick is a trick, it's not magic.
Okay, so the illusion is dependent on a certain level of avidya, ignorance and delusion, yeah?
Yes, a
And
certain
then
amount.
by
Piled higher and deeper.
yeah, right. It's fairly it's just deeper and deeper. Sorry. So lost my train of thought there. Wow, no, I'm still kind of reeling from a few of the things you've said earlier. Like, okay. I had one last question. Sorry. So in terms of the structuring my practice around the Satipatthana Sutta, because I like some of the things in there. I guess I've got two questions really. So one way that people look at it is from a sort of more imaginal visualization aspect. So like if we're doing like the elements meditation, I see my leg as composed of like composite, like a bit of fire here, some rock or earth here, water here, wind here. But then other people say it's not that kind of fanciful. It's actually more like liquidity, solidity, movement, and I forget what the other one is.
Okay, these words that you're using come out of the Buddhist religion, most of it from, let us say, the 5th century, etc., like that. And that there's no need to think about it like that. A better way, you see, in a way, those are kind of artificial labels that you're putting on things, and that people saw things like that way back when. Westerners don't look at it like that. And so placing that foreign frame of reference onto things may not be useful or valuable.
Right.
That a better way of looking at it is basically a better way is kind of the way that the Mahasi talks about it, only to a point. And that is that a lot of the people think that the Mahasi method has to do with vocalization when they note. Okay, and they get that from touching, sitting, rising, falling. Rising, falling, touching, sitting. Now, as I breathe in, the chest rises. As I breathe out and I notice that the chest falls, I do not have to use the word rising, falling. That's the artificial part, is putting the word in there.
The label is not the word. The label is not the thing itself.
It's right. The Tao that can be said is not the Tao. Okay, we actually want to watch the body in its movements rather than labeling it.
Right.
So it's not the language that you're using. That's an important thing. So whatever language that you're using, recognizing that you're using a language when in fact it's the direct experience of what we're shooting for.
So this is like what TB teaches, where it's like any label or perception that we have is helpful and skillful so long as it actually directs us into our felt experience of the body and the breath. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard teachers say it that way before. Yeah, only do enough of the verbalized noting to get you pointed in the right direction. That the real experience is that panda sigh. The panda does not say sighing.
Right, he just does it.
He just does it.
Okay.
Exactly. All right. So this is a way of looking at the just that. So when you're doing anapanasati, things will happen, and a lot of the students will be confused. The answer to that is, and here's the right answer: one by one as they occur. And when you hear that answer, you'll understand what the question is.
Right.
What do I practice next? The answer is you practice what's there one by one as they occur.
Okay.
So simple. In other words, what this present moment presents to you, that's your practice.
Right. Oh, and then would that be sort of what we look at the Satipatthana as our toolbox of things to deal with the problems? So, like the bodily contemplations
Uh-huh.
are for like lust, and I would say lust is the most obvious one, and that's the one they always talk about. So, really, I should just see the Satipatthana not as like a laundry list of things or a to-do list, but a list of options for one by one as they occur.
Well, yes. And the framework that we use is the Satipatthana, but the 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 point or the point of view is anapanasati. In other words, we're here practicing Satipatthana. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it for the fulfillment of the Satipatthana. Don't get those
Right.
two things confused. You're doing anapanasati, and this is the structure and method of anapanasati, and by doing it that way, the things that are brought to fruition that are mentioned in the Satipatthana will happen. So it's good to know what things that will happen in the Satipatthana Sutta, but the actual practice is the anapanasati. So staying with
Okay.
anapanasati is the way to go, but whenever you do, you're always working within that frame of reference of the Satipatthana. Now, here's the next point, which is even more profound, and that is that we practice the Satipatthana for the fulfillment of the seven factors of enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, what is a factor of enlightenment? Is sati a factor of enlightenment?
Yes.
Is mindfulness a factor of enlightenment?
Yes.
This is a trick question. Be careful.
Okay. Well, all right. Actually, no. Neither of them are. They point to a concept. They
Okay,
point to
here's
the
the
same
word.
concept.
Here's
Right.
the special word. Here's McBuddha's special sauce. The
Right.
special sauce is unremitting mindfulness. That's the word to use.
Okay.
And I wanted to make sure that you do that, that you've got that it becomes an enlightenment factor when you keep coming back and keep doing it over and over again. Yeah, it's okay to get lost. You come back and you hit that drum again. That not
Okay.
all drum beats have the drumstick on the drum head. To make music, you have to hit that drum over and over and over and over again to keep coming back to the here now, to come back to the here now, over and over and over again. And when sati becomes unremitting, now it becomes an enlightenment factor. And it'll
Okay.
become an enlightenment factor for a little while, and then it'll drop away, and then we'll get another one 15 minutes or 2 hours from now, and then we'll be unremitting mindfulness for a little while, and then we'll lose it again, and then we'll get it again. Okay, and the more you
Right.
practice, then the more secure, so that unremitting mindfulness will come more often and be unremitting longer.
Right. Okay.
That's what makes it an enlightenment factor, not just merely remembering. I mean, you remember where your keys are. You remember you remember your mom's birthday. You remember all kinds of things. But when you keep it focused, I'm remembering. And and so that's why we give these little techniques like watching speech, so that we
Mm-hmm.
begin to start watching. That's that.
Right.
That's that sati that keep looking. That's that unremitting mindfulness, and when it's unremitting, we call it the guard. To start guarding the mind, start
Right.
watching what it's doing, to
Mm-hmm.
take over. That we're not going to let the reptilian brain operate this place anymore. This is not an instinct. Life is not instinctual.
Right.
Needs to be wisdom, and so this is why that's an unremitting. So unremitting mindfulness is a quality that's an enlightenment factor.
Mm-hmm.
So when you recognize, then the next one is investigation. Well, what are we investigating? We're investigating dukkha. So we're on to the Four Noble Truths, and when we stay on the Four Noble Truths, unremitting,
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes an enlightenment factor. Uh,
Oh.
okay,
Oh.
we stay
Okay.
focused, and now that goes back to Sutta number 2.
Right.
What is worthy of what's worthy of attention? The Four Noble Truths are worthy of attention. So what do we
Right.
investigate? And when we keep on investigating, then that investigation becomes an enlightenment factor to stay with the
Okay.
Four Noble Truths. Now, we
Oh.
can't do all
Okay.
four of the Noble Truths, so which one should I do? The answer to that is one by one as they occur.
Right.
So I want to spend some time recognizing, this is what the third noble truth is like. This is a situation that's completely without suffering. Right this very minute, for a little while, I'm going to be completely enlightened, completely free. Okay, so that's the third noble truth. Okay, so then we do it like that. We start thinking about things like compassion and right view are linked together. And so we start making these connections. In a way, you could think of that the Buddha Dhamma is like a jigsaw puzzle.
Right.
And you were delivered a box of pieces and a picture on the front. And it's your job to put the darn thing together. Well, guess what? We don't have 500 pieces, so that's at least
Right.
but the second one is that this is not only three-dimensional, it's possibly even higher dimensional. But there is a jigsaw puzzle that's made out of wood. It's a Chinese puzzle, and it winds up being a box or a block, very much like a Rubik cube, except that you recognize that, if I pull on that little square, then it starts to unravel, and now you've got 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 pieces there, and you have to learn how to put all of those things back together into that Chinese box.
Okay.
In a way, that's what the Dhamma is like. That's why we have to dissect it. You have to take it apart. And then we put it back together again. But by doing so, we've done proper diagnosis. We've picked out some subroutines and programs that are no longer useful and popped in a few new AI routines. And now we're got a whole new human being here. Only the difference is that this was a happy dude.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, Danny's question.
Yeah.
Does one study have to go deeper, or can one continue to learn the Dhamma just as we are now, with lots of laughs and fun and light-hearted investigation?
Yes, and by doing so, we begin to go deeper. We keep looking at stuff, and now we can see things that we didn't see before. That's an expression. In fact, there's really no deeper. Really, it's what's happening right now, dude. Can you see it?
Right.
And for a while, we miss a lot of stuff, but then we start picking it up, and then the better we get at picking it up, the more we see.
Yeah. Because other studies seem to attempt to persuade the student to go deeper than they're ready to, and it's this painful kind of book study with making notes and listening to recordings, and you know what I'm talking about, Dhammarato. This is the Alexander technique stuff.
I do.
Right?
Been there, done that.
Right.
On both sides of that fence, by the way.
Right. And so my concern is that waiting for me in Buddhism too? Is there
Nope.
am I going to be
No, actually, by now you'll consider it that it's all going to be a repeat. This is all repeat business. I've already given you the whole handful of leaves, and that's enough. Now, what happens is, here's what happens. The normal human mind, let's use mathematics as an example, because I've been there, and done that. And what I'm saying is the following. That a student of mathematics will read the first chapter, get a good understanding of what it is, and then he'll go and he'll read the second chapter, and he'll get much of what that is, and he'll go to the third chapter, and he'll read a bit, and he'll get a little confused, but he's got it. By the fourth chapter, he's lost. Why is that? Because he didn't do the examples in chapter 1, and he didn't get what he needed as a complete foundation to do chapter 2. So now that he's moving up the scale, he's getting further and further away from some of the basics. That happens in Buddhism big time.
Right.
All right. Hello, Kitty. Come see my friends. I've got 2 friends here. You remember Danny?
Hey, Kitty.
Hey, Kitty. So, what happens then is that the students will read something and they'll say, oh, that's what it's all about. This is really good. Let me read a little bit more. Well, what they just read was, go sit down and watch your mind. But they don't go down and sit down and watch their mind. What they do is they read the next chapter of the book. And when they get to the end of that book and they're still not enlightened, they go look for other books to read. And eventually they'll read a book, and the title of that book starts with the word deep. And they'll say, aha, this is the right book to read.
Yeah.
And so that's how they hook you, is because you haven't been practicing that which. And here's the good news, Danny. You're still alive. You're still alive. Yeah, you see our. Yeah. You're still alive. Okay, what does that mean? That means that so long as you're alive, you still have an opportunity to practice. Never mind, start again. That's the right attitude, and that's the major change in attitude. In fact, the Dhamma is actually quite simple. Okay, it's very simple. Let's say it like this. Imagine that you were in a museum and the most prized possession in that museum was sitting in a room that was well guarded by a set of laser beams that nobody can see. And so if anybody walks into that room anywhere close to that valuable thing, they'll be detected. But we've got a special machine, and that special machine shows where the laser beams are. And so all we have to do is avoid those laser beams, and we can walk right up to that object and pick it up and walk right back out because we know what to avoid. Right? Now, everybody else is worrying that doesn't have that machine that shows where all those laser beams are. They're really worried. They're going deep. They're trying to figure out. They may, in fact, dig a hole. They may take the roof off. They may do all kinds of stuff. And we waltzed in there. All we had to do is watch where the laser beams were and avoid them. Okay? That's what I'm trying to teach you. I'm trying to give you a laser detector, a bullshit detector. And that bullshit detector is the Four Noble Truths. And with the Four Noble Truths, and you operate with them, you can see those little lines of laser dukkha, and you can avoid it.
Yeah. And I really want to believe this.
Well, all you have to do is see it in action time by time. You do not have to think, oh, I cannot believe this works just because I can step around this beam. I've got to go test it on the Louvre.
Yeah.
And only if I can break into the Louvre and steal everything that they have will I believe my little my laser detector will work. And you don't have to test it like that. You just need to test it every time in this moment, one by one as they occur. If you can take care, this is what you need to be able to understand, Danny. Can you be happy for right now for 1 minute? Never mind what happens after that. Just this 1 minute. Can you be okay this minute? If you can do okay this minute, then you can do okay one more minute. And that's all it takes, is one step at a time. And so that's why that is Chinese, but it's very Buddhist. Every trip starts with the single first step. Your Dhamma is that way. And now, after taking all of these steps into the Dhamma, now you're planning a long journey, when in fact, no, you don't have to plan a long journey. Just plan where you're going to put your next footfall. That's all you have to do. Just don't step on a pile of crap in this next step. That's all you have to do.
Wow. Okay.
But of course, our conditioning, our peers, everyone around us is saying, no, you got to dig a hole. The machine, there's no such thing as a little machine that tells you where the lasers are. No such thing. You've got to work.
Exactly. That's exactly right. It's exactly right. That's why this Dharma teaching is so revolutionary.
Mhm.
What a well-timed pratfall.
Sorry, guys.
Excellent timing. We're going to have to put you on Saturday Night Live.
I'm gonna head off. I've got
Okay.
just for the following. Just so I have something in mind for the following readings. Following week, I'll keep reading Nibbana for everyone. I'll do the suttas we did today, and then the one by one as they occur. One you've mentioned. Is there anything else you want me to have a look at?
No, we didn't get into the chariot, and we'll do that eventually, as well as its companion sutta number 48. Funny how one is exactly the double the number of the other when they're talking about exactly the same topic from different viewpoints. Um, so, yeah, be sure to stay in the direction of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa.
Yeah.
Any Buddhist reading that you do uh, can possibly be a mixture of noble and ordinary Buddhist religion. And it's better to stay with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa because you know that it's always going to be noble. And the sutras will always be noble if you know how to read them.
Right.
Which means you need to learn to read around the translators.
Right.
Okay.
But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has done some of that work for us. Is that right?
Yeah, right. Oh, Robert is such a joy. We have a friend named Robert who actually lives in Thailand and has lived here for long enough that he's excellent at Thai. And that he actually reads Thai well enough that he actually reads the suttas in Thai language. So now he has the ability to read the Pali and the Thai and the English, and he and I are both having a great time pointing out, because I'll point it out to him and he'll look it up and say, yeah, you're right, exactly. The Thai translation is correct and the English translation is wrong, and that just happens time after time after time. So, yeah, stay with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and the sutras that I've given you. I know that that there's enormous amount of sutras, but the ones that I use kind of put everything that's needed into a package.
Right.
And so staying with that package will be enough. And the most important one starts with the Anapanasati Sutta, and eventually we'll get into a sutta called the Great 40, which is 117, which is a deep discussion, there's that word deep again, of the Eightfold Noble Path.
Okay.
And so basically the whole show is this, is the number one thing is to figure out that we in fact can control our mind. That's the very first thing that we figure out. The second thing is start to control it. All right. The next thing that we do is once we get the mind fit for work, and now we start looking at the Eightfold Noble Path, and once we do that, that aha of now I know. Now I know what it's all about, but that requires then a new level of dedication, that now I'm responsible. It's sort of like, hey, if somebody gives you the keys to the kingdom, now you've got a new responsibility. You're responsible for the kingdom. You've got the keys. And in fact, that's basically except that the kingdom now is your whole life. That you've got the keys to your life. What are you going to do with it?
Right.
That's That's that middle point between the fruit of Sotapan and the path of Sotapan. That path, when we come up to the point, there's a point when we get the keys. And that keys, then getting the keys is the knowledge and vision of what is the path and what is not the path.
Okay.
In other words, getting the keys to the kingdom means I've got the path now. I've got the way. And by the way, the keys to the kingdom is not the keys to get into the kingdom. It's the keys to your cell to get out of the kingdom.
Right. Fair enough.
And by having this knowledge of what that key represents and how to use it, you actually now, surprisingly enough, you have an obligation. You actually have you cannot stay in that cell and hold that key and say, I'm okay, I'm going to be victim here in this, and when I've got to. No, we've got to use it. We've got to get out. You've got to find that freedom.
Right.
Okay, so that's it's an important quality then, is at that point in time when you have the knowledge and vision of what is and what is not the path, with that comes enormous obligation that now I've got to live that path.
Okay.
And by doing it, eventually, and I'll tell you about it later, great joy arises that you really like it. This is a really good path. This is a winner. I like it.
Okay.
So
yeah, looking forward to all that stuff. I'll keep on practicing, keep my mindfulness going as much as I can, and I'll keep reading these suttas.
And watch your mouth.
Yep. No dirty, no selfie. That'll definitely stick with me.
Okay.
Ooh, there we go. See already. Within a second, it already wants to come back. Wow, that's a neat little trick. I'll keep that. This collection of aggregates is going to leave this chat now.
From this location.
This aggregates will be moving spatially and temporally, but will converse with you again. Bye, guys.
Bye, Ashley. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. Sadhu.
Oh, Danny, haven't seen you on a group call in a while.
Yeah. I can't remember the last.
I think you were on with Robert one time.
I don't think I've met Robert.
Okay. Someone else.
That was delightful, though.
Excellent. Good review.
Very good review.
So, I'm getting a little tired. It's actually quite late now.
Sure.
And there's something that I actually do want to cover with you. But last time we didn't do that because of daddy issues. But I see you smiling now, and so I thought I'd at least ask the question about how did all of that go?
It went well. It was strange exploring the possibility of not giving my father the whole truth and taking responsibility for myself without the training wheels on, without daddy's safety net.
Excellent. Well, I'd like actually to hear more about that. And there's something else that we have, which is unfinished business that we had from one of the chatting that we were doing, which would be a follow-on from the time before that, when we were talking about basically what's an normality you know, that kind of thing. And then you said that you had gotten over it, but we never had discussed the getting over it. And so I wanted to talk to you about that because I remember that you were in in a pretty low funk, but
Yeah.
we haven't talked about it because we discussed it on in chat rather than online or with video. So I'd like to go back and rehash some of that next time.
Okay.
Is it okay that I go now?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Because I've been doing it for quite a long time today, so I'm going to let you go.
Great.
And see you later, Danny.
Okay,
Hopefully
Dhammarato.
very soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.